If you were to run your athlete through this progression with an 8-week accumulation phase, a 6-week intensification phase, and 3 weeks of sport-specific speed, I can almost guarantee that they would improve their performance in 25.1. But they would do that without having to train specifically for the test. They would improve their performance in all of the mid-time domain, low barrier to entry tests that we can expect to show up in these online qualifiers. And as coaches, our goal is to get our athletes better at CrossFit, which is unknown and unknowable. And so improving their performance across the board and not just for a test is what's most important for us. In this sport, the likelihood that this exact test comes out again is really low. But workouts like this test show up in the open and online qualifiers all the time. While it doesn't make sense to train specifically for this workout, I'm gonna walk through some training progressions that I would use to help athletes improve in tests like this. When I say a test like this, what I mean are 10 to 18 minute time domain tests with low barrier to entry movements. Things like rowing, wall ball, shuttles, double unders, box jump overs, and light dumbbell movements. Basically anything that doesn't have a skill or load bottleneck. As a coach, if your athletes struggle with this, it's likely because they lack one of 3 things. The first, cardiovascular endurance. Second, local muscular endurance. And the third, movement efficiency. Cardiovascular endurance limitations will look like issues with controlling heart rate and breathing during workouts. Muscular endurance will manifest as local fatigue in the shoulders or legs during movements like wall ball, hang clean and jerk, and burpees. And efficiency limitations affect both. It comes down to improving movement patterns. Movement efficiency is highly individualized, and you have to see the athlete to be able to help them make corrections. So we're not going to talk about that in this video. Instead, we're going to look at the types of training progressions that I would use to help athletes improve in these types of tests. My approach would include 3 phases. Phase 1 would be an accumulation or base building phase. Phase 2 would be an intensification phase where we start to layer in some speed and intensity into their training. And phase 3 would be a sport-specific speed phase where we train specifically for the 25.1 test. Let's dig into them. The first phase is our base building phase. Now, this is probably the most important for most of the athletes who struggle with a test like 25.1. The reason is that most research shows that you need to do low intensity aerobic work to build a foundation before an athlete can even adapt to higher intensity, higher speed work. So what I like to do is I like to use a very simple structure, something like 4 to 5 rounds of 1 minute of bike, 1 minute of burpees, 1 minute row, 1 minute of shuttle, and a minute of rest. You can change the movements in here, anything that's going to be low barrier to entry, things that are 2 to 4, maybe 2 to 5 seconds per rep fit really well within this. And you're going to want your athletes to do this at a smooth aerobic, steady state pace, something where they can maintain the same bike, burpee, and row calories or reps from the start to finish. If there's any fall off, they're going too fast to start. It's important to keep it at a very low, steady state effort that's sustainable across the first round to the last round. Now, to progress this, you're going to use it over the course of 6 or 8 weeks. So you might start with 4 rounds and progress your way up to 6. But there's other ways you can progress as well. You can, instead of just doing 1 minute of each of the movements, you can go to 90 seconds of each of the movements and increase the density of what you're doing in here. I also changed the movement selection by week. So it's not always going to be burpee, bike, row, and shuttle. We might include things like dumbbell snatches, double unders, and wall ball in these workouts as well. Now, this is really important. If you skip this step, you miss out on all of the low intensity accumulation that's necessary to build speed and performance in each of the next steps. Phase 2 is our intensification phase, and our goal here is to increase the intensity. We want to shift from focusing on steady movement and time domain based training to something where the athlete has specific targets and specific pace targets. So as an example, we might start with 7 rounds of 10 calories on the bike, 10 burpees, 10 dumbbell snatches, and 10 wall ball. Now, these are all still low barrier to entry movements, but we've given them very specific targets to hit. So for example, we know that 1 burpee every 3 seconds and 1 dumbbell snatch every 3 seconds is competitive. So I want them to hit these targets and maintain that all the way across. This is a good structure to start adding intensity to their training. This is really important. If you skip this step, you're pushing your athletes from low intensity training to essentially competition pace without a transition phase. And while it can work, the transition phase often demoralizes athletes. Phase 3 is our sport-specific speed phase. And what we're trying to do here is train specifically for Open 25.1. In the first week, we would break the workout down into 3 or 4 3-minute AMRAPs with 3 minutes rest between, doing something like 12 burpees, 12 hang clean and jerk, 30-foot walking lunge for that full 3-minute AMRAP. And the goal here is to hold the specific pace and speed that you want the athlete to hold in the workout. In the next week, we would transition to 4-minute AMRAPs. And then in the final week, we would go to 5-minute AMRAPs. So we're accumulating 15 to 20 minutes of work at their target pace. And then in week 4, you would have them retest Open 25.1. This step is critical because it allows you to transition all of the general adaptations your athlete built during the base and intensification phases into something that improves their performance in this specific test. If you were to run your athlete through this progression with an 8-week accumulation phase, a 6-week intensification phase, and 3 weeks of sport-specific speed, I can almost guarantee that they would improve their performance in 25.1. But they would do that without having to train specifically for the test. They would improve their performance in all of the mid-time domain, low barrier to entry tests that we can expect to show up in these online qualifiers. And as coaches, our goal is to get our athletes better at CrossFit, which is unknown and unknowable. And so improving their performance across the board and not just for a test is what's most important for us.